Good. So yeah, it's tough as the day goes on. I think it's just tougher and tougher to speak because everybody's covering off a lot of the same points. So I apologize if I go over some the exact same things that we just talked about. So executing the plan, what we have to do. I talked about some of it this morning, so try not to repeat myself. Reducing the herd. We went through that, flipping the rotation. So the challenges with some of that was, okay, we don't want to change our outputs. We have to manage it all within the confines. So it's being really creative on the movements. So having staff that are really good at keeping track of where things are going. They're having a system. I think in Largy it was a white pin board, and this week's sows are here, next week's sows are there, and it is a huge challenge for the staff because the thing with sow barns is you build a routine and you modify your routine, and every day is the same thing. And then when you're doing something like this, there's no routine. So how do you overcome not having a routine? Where today's sow's going, where do we wean today? It changes, and if you're not set up to deal with that, it's a huge headache. So one of the things that we had is, okay, every morning we're having a meeting, and the meeting is where did today's sows go? Where the next sow's coming from to load the room, and with that it makes it better, or the pin board or something to do that. If you don't have the ability to have an open room and then another open room when you're modifying the next. So we wanted to create 3 open pens to do the work, and it was managing that so that the maintenance guys were able to continue on at their pace, and that they weren't held up by the movements. So it seemed to work fairly well. It just took a lot of forward thinking. Source materials, talked about that earlier. I went through and figured, okay, I marked all the slots that we need. I'm going to take an extra 50%, so I came up with a number, and that was going to be enough for the entire project. I got through the first room, and we've used up all the slots. Well, okay, we're going to reorder. I've doubled the order, and then we get into the third room, and the gilts are dropping their toes through the slot gaps that were fine for the sows. So now we need to replace 5 times the amount of slots that we initially started with. So it little surprises that come along the way, and then the pitfalls of the time that it takes is a bit of an issue. So yeah, so here's the finished pen. Issues we had here, trying to get this concrete to stick. I mean, I redid the first couple pens 3 times before I figured it out. You get a contractor, I guess that's his problem. You don't, they're all your problems. And then we wanted to have dividers. This divider was a bit of an issue, so we ended up cutting these off and securing them onto this area. Part of the problem was we didn't have the required amount of space for the animals to pass. So you end up with lots of space in the pen, but the boss lays here and she keeps all of this empty space to herself. So, then we had to address that and change that. I talked about those things, reinforcing the dividers, gilt pen, new slots. Considerations, allow the time to source the material. Start with a few pens. So we built 2 pens, seemed to work, put sows in, figured it was perfect. We had no fallout, no issues, everything was great. And then thought, well, 2 pens was enough, so let's build a few more, let them sit for the remainder of their gestation. And then, people are running into the office saying, I've got a pig that's stuck. And so the dividers were too high. So then we had to lower all the dividers. And it was nice to go slowly, that we identified some of these issues before we had 2,000 crates converted, we only had converted 100 crates. Extra room in the budget for things to come up, vaccination and feedback. So everything's crated, you walk along the back, vaccinate all your sows. Now you moved into the pens. How's the person going to do that you're not creating a lot of stress? I can't say that we've got it figured out perfectly, but if you could do it at feeding time, sometimes it's better, or maybe you're offering a little bit of feed to do some of the vaccinations, to put their mind somewhere else where you're doing the vaccinations. Backfeed, that one was a little simpler. Accurate records of locations, we talked about that. Solid prep checking plan. That was big, just with identifying that late term fallout when it's there, when it goes for 10 weeks and then it's a big surprise at the end. You got a lot of lost time, and it takes a lot to get that sorted. So the sooner you know about some of these issues, the better. Enrichment, we tried some enrichment. And we did some of the chain disc. Didn't see a lot of interest in it, but I think there's different ones out there, and some of them work better than others. Minimizing aggression. I think I have a video just coming up right after this. And not over conditioning. So the easiest way in competitive feeding system, offer more feed. And then everybody's a little bit happier, less aggression. So how are we going to manage this? So we thought, initially, we want to make sure that we get everybody in the perfect condition while we have them in a crate, and then when we put them in the loose pens, it will just maintain that condition. We ran into a bit of an issue where we had to continue to overfeed a little bit, and sows were getting a bit heavier. So we thought we're gonna try and keep things as tight as we can in the implantation period, so that we can allow for a little bit of overfeeding in that first week to 10 days while there's a lot of aggression and they're figuring out the pecking order. It settles that down, and then we could kind of get them back onto the plane where we need them of the restriction. So we'll see if this one plays. I just did a time lapse, just kind of show some of the activity in the first few minutes. Very active. The fighting is a little bit tough to see. A little bit of it going on in the middle there. And some culprits, they just continue to be the ones that are aggressive. And it tends to last in sometimes for up to a week. And you can see the one sow here. She's been in a couple battles and was this was 10 minutes, and for 5 minutes of it she was fighting with 3 different sows. Another video clip. Just maybe highlight, this sow here. They go through and if there's a sow that needs attention, they just put a target on her back. And she's pushed off again there, and then finally finds herself a spot there. And yeah, it's in slow motion. Yeah, I think that the design of these pens is going to make a bit of difference. Quite interesting looking at Matt's design and even the other video that was shown with one stall per sow and everybody in a row, with a little bit of less jockeying around, where we have some pens that have a lot of movement. Comparison numbers. So earlier I showed 6 months before conversion assumptions, and then the actual last 13 weeks. And then wanted to highlight on some of our opportunities, so how well we've done, or where we have opportunities yet. This presentation, some of this I put together in October, so these numbers have changed, some of them for the better, but anyways, where we're at this point, we ended up with setting a target at 21.5 days. We've gotten up to 20 days, so we still have a day and a half of opportunity in our wean age that we're needing to achieve. And with that, we're still shy of our wean weight target in there. Our pre-wean mortality, we were thinking that we were going to be 11.5, a bit higher. I'm not going to say that all of these things are related to the loose housing. I mean, and sow barn is so dynamic and different things going on, but this is just where we're at. So a bit of room to make up with the mortality, the pre-wean. Into the nursery, we've gotten our exit weights up, so that value that we were shooting for, we've achieved. Feed conversion was better than we predicted, and the mortality here, we were shooting for 3. We did see an improvement from the pre-conversion with the heavier pig and other things that are going on at the time, and even in the last period, we're in the last 6 weeks, we're probably closer to the 2%. So we've seen some additional improvements in the very short term. And then our target, 107,000, so we're close. We were 500 pigs off where we had set to be. It's a bit of opportunity. Late term fallout market, touched on that. We hit as high as 10%. We had a bit of a wreck there at the start with the competition and the aggression in late gestation. Quickly addressed it, but it had lasting effects. Brought it down, we were sitting at 6, and then lately we're getting closer to a period of 5. Still some work to do with late-term fallout. Pigs weaned, big shortfall here with that late-term fallout affecting our sales farrowed. Things back up to target levels. After that, we had adjusted our services and got things back on check. Sow mortality, definitely not a highlight on our farm. Had some issues in here. We had made some feed changes. We talked about that earlier. Moving feeds, changing a few of the ingredients, going to a mash, and with higher fiber. So we had seen some improvement with that. I still need to figure out what's going on at this point, but we have made some improvements and still a ways to go. Take home messages. What are the limitations of the existing farm? Flow change, how we manage it, what surprises are lying underneath the manure. And it's major disruption, so we need to plan for that. Capture your opportunities where you can, and learn from other people's experiences where possible. Thank you.
Mark, can you come up here with Scott? We have a few minutes for some questions. And again, I'd like to thank Automated Productions for sponsoring this breakout session. So Scott, we have one question that came on the poll, and I'll read that one out first, and then we'll open up the floor. Or if you don't feel comfortable, please send in your questions. So the first one is, Scott, if you build new, would you do the same thing as the shoulder stalls, or would you go with your first option with ESF or a just all system?
Is none of the above an option?
No.
Tough question. Probably, I mean, the ESF is nice, and if you're building from scratch, then cost isn't as big of a concern if you're starting from a green field. Yeah, it could be one of those options. I'm not saying it would be just all.
Any other questions for Mark and Scott? Just 1 second, I will. I'm not going to run.
Run for us.
On the
barns that you converted from stalls where the sows are standing back to back with look like a 2-foot aisle behind them, is that enough room to keep just as many sows in there?
Is that for Mark? That's for Mark?
Whatever.
Sure.
Well, there's two answers to that, because the one farm we put sow for sow. So today they're sitting at 16, 17 square feet, and the code says 19. And that's sow for sow. In Scott's farm, they're sitting at, sows are at 19.
Yeah, we're at 19 on the sows and 17 on the goats, so we're within code, but I wouldn't go any more sows.
Okay.
Hi, Peter. Mark, I had a question. What was your conversion cost, if you can share it, for your retrofit per sow space?
I don't. Is this working? Yeah. I don't have the dollar on just loose housing. I could put that together, but the project itself was a 2,500 sow herd barn, and we replaced everything in the breeding gestation end, which was 5 rooms of crates, entire feed systems, all the augers in from the bin, and 76 gest stall stations and loose penning, and a bunch of slats. It was about $1 million. Yeah, that includes all the crates, the feed lines, the drives, the augers, the labor. Just over $1 million by 1.1.
Okay, so we've got a couple more questions that have come in on the computer. If you have one sow that continues to be the aggressor, would you cull her regardless of her performance?
If we could identify that sow, we do have crates within the system, and if the grape just put her in a crate. So we had an issue with, we needed water tanks within each gestation row, so how do we convert the space under them? So we decided to leave them. It gives us flexibility for sows with that situation.
In ESF, we don't necessarily look for the aggressor. We look for the sow that's the timid sow, the one that's got beat up. And so we have a push list every day. We call it the push list. It's red flag sows that have eaten whatever parameter you set. But if they haven't eaten 50% of their feed for the last 2 days, we try to find them and get them to the station. And after 3 days of trying to get them to the station, we end up just giving up, and we take them out and put them in a stall. The one thing we haven't, I don't think, followed up on is whether that sow is a repeat offender. She's always the timid sow. Chances are she is. And it's not size, it's just their personality type. You can have big sows, just as Sylvain was showing this morning. She's trying to get to the feeder, and if she gets pushed back, she gives up and she doesn't bother. And it's not that they don't want to. If you get them to the feeder without any competition, bang, they're in there, and they will feed. It's just that they're just, they're too timid, and they end up staying back.
Okay, and one other that came in on the computer for Scott. If the answer to your first question was none of the above, what would you do?
Change professions. That's a tough question. I think it requires a lot of thinking on that one in economics. So, yeah, it's not a 2-minute question. Sorry.
Any other questions? Blair, you have a big voice.
Yes, so just back to the shoulder stall, Scott. You captured only the 2 feet all the way behind, correct? But you decreased the number of sows in that space, or did you keep it the same?
Decrease the number of sows in that space.
So there's more eating space.
Yes.
Sows.
So there's 18 stanchions and 15 sows. And our ability to change the feeding was not change every drop, but turning on and off feed stations. So it reduced a little bit of labor on the feed management.
How can you keep that clean if the feeder
I'm gonna get him to repeat the question.
With 4 feet of concrete, how can we keep the concrete clean? I was actually.
Scott, can you
amazed.
repeat the question?
So, I did. I'll repeat it again, Marcia. So with like 4 feet of concrete, how can we keep it clean? With the 4 feet of solid area, it was amazing how clean the pens are. As long as we can manage the water, because we're watering through the trough. If we don't manage the water well, or so if we don't manage the troughs well, there's slopping and then it's wet, and that makes a bigger mess than anything.
The other farm out west we converted, we had the automatic waterers in there, so the pipe kept the level of water in there. We had to drop that level by 2 inches because from what Scott said, they were slopping it, so you just have less water availability. I mean, they still got water, but just.
Why would you put water nipples in it instead of trying to water through the trough?
Well, first I was gonna see if I could do it without spending any money and then go to that route, and we're able to manage it fine. So we're gonna just keep it how it is.
Any more questions? Yeah, Stan?
So for Scott, so you guys had like 4 different systems in your production unit, right?
Nope, that was not.
Oh, that was a different one, okay. No, I was gonna ask him, he can otherwise answer if he's here. Is he here?
Matt's still here.
Oh, he's maybe on
Maybe on the panel.
He'll be on the panel.
Okay, well, I was gonna ask if he sees like an economic difference between them. Because he was saying he doesn't see a difference, you know, between his different systems, let's say, that they all work and whatever, like.
Mark, maybe you can loop to that with Just Stall and the shorter stalls that you have in your company.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you 3 answers. Answer number 1, the first conversion we did was Gesto, and as you saw, Sow Mortality, late fallout went up, but today it looks like it's coming back to pre-conversion levels. So from a farmer economics, less sow deaths, less fallout means lower cost of production. Conversion number 2, or through the same period, Scott did stalls, continued higher sow mortality and higher fallout. So from that production, higher cost. The third farm we're doing, which is the same as Scott's, but different genetics. Today, nothing's changed. So, and there's one actually renovation I didn't touch on is we've got a 2500 sow feral to finish unit that we depopped in the spring out west, and we've just repopped it, and we've converted it to 3800 sow feral to wean. So the pen gestation is the finisher pens. Turn 2 finisher pens into 1 finisher pen, and we're floor feeding. It's a competitive system, but floor feeding. So jury's still out on that one. I mean, we only recently started farrowing, and it's a gilt herd, so we don't know. There. Is that good?
Well, I'd like to thank Scott and Mark for sharing their stories this afternoon. And again, Scott will be on the panel, and I'm sure Mark will be around for the rest of the day if you do have questions. So again, we'd like to thank you both for speaking this afternoon.